So I'd like to just welcome everybody into this space. We're here to talk about spirituality a little bit more today and religion and just exploring all of those things. And before we get started, I want to invite each one of us to land inside these beautiful vehicles that we've created to have this human experience. Just noticing, like, we're going to take a look around, notice our environment. Maybe we're noticing if we're in a safe place, what noises are going on, what smells we experience, what senses we may be igniting right now. And then take that orientation into your body. What are you noticing is going on in the environment inside your body right now? What are you hearing? What are you seeing? What are you sensing? What are you smelling? What are you tasting? And what's asking to be heard inside? And just follow your breath in and out. First, with awareness. What is my breath doing right now? Does it feel smooth? Does it feel at ease? Is it flowing in and out of my body? Does it feel a little sticky? How far is it going into my body? Does it feel like it stops at my chest? Does it go into my heart? Can I carry my breath all the way to my fingertips and my toes? And just observing with great curiosity what is going on inside, and if you feel safe on the inside. And if there's anything that you need in this moment, to be present, to be a part of this conversation. I notice I am feeling a little bit cold at the moment. So I notice that my breath has a little bit of a shake to it with that chill. I just invite you all to notice whatever it is that you're noticing without judgment. And then if there's something that you need, please feel invited to speak that. And we'll get started. Let's go in reverse alphabetical order. Christy, how are you doing right now?
Really good. I am also cold. So I've got my blanket.
Perfect.
And the space heater, and trying to work on what I have here today. Some kind of coconut water. Getting my body hydrated.
Awesome.
Fire truck just went by. I feel rested. I got to have a little downtime this morning, and it just felt really nice to just be with me for a minute. Good.
Erin, how
My
are you
toes
feeling?
are cold, but that's typical. But yeah, I'm feeling good. Yeah.
Is there anything you need?
Mm-hmm.
Then we'll hand it off to Brenda. And after you check in with us, if there's anything you need and how you're feeling, feel free to take it away and take us on the journey today.
I am feeling really good.
Mm-hmm.
Some nervous excitement because I really want to do this, and this is exciting for me and fun for me, and I'm curious to see what the conversation brings today. But no, I'm doing good today. not cold. Only one of us that don't have any cold body parts right now. So I'm going to kick us off. Last week, we opened Pandora's box on religion, and I brought about a bunch of topics that incurred discussion. We're going to do that again today. As an overview, just a brief overview, we were discussing that religion is a sharing of common beliefs amongst groups of people, and just a generic definition, not of any specific organization. And then spirituality is more of an individual, internal practice. And we're going to get more to spirituality today, but we're going to continue on. I had a couple more points I wanted to bring up last week that we ran out of time for. Okay. So the first topic of the day in talking about religion and what religion has as a baseline of belief that vary amongst religions is the afterlife, or the lack of one, or what happens to your soul when the physical body dies. Do you even have one? So I'm just going to throw out there some of the things that came to my mind, and then we'll pass it around the room. So do you go straight to heaven when you die? Does that happen for everybody or only a select few of the organization? Do you believe in reincarnation, that you either can move to a higher or lower creature on your next round based on your actions and behaviors of this round? Or are you just coming back to experience a different human experience the next time around? The dead are conscious of nothing at all until a resurrection after an apocalypse. A lot of religions base, the end of the world with an apocalyptic type event, whether or not humans are here to survive it, whether they're taken away beforehand, all those kinds of things, whether you go to limbo first and then heaven or hell, based on your judgment, and specifically judgment upon death of the physical body. So I open it up for anything that might speak to anybody.
I have so much curiosity here, and it's just, in my opinion, the most taboo conversation, because how would you even know what it is? Because the people that have passed can't share. I mean, and that might even be a rather taboo statement, right? I personally like to believe that there's just the next level of living, like the soul continues in some kind of way. I don't choose to believe in like purgatory or like coming back in a lower form or whatever. I think the thing that feels right in my soul is like, this soul is just here to experience life. And then when my body ends, my experience ends, that it just continues in another form. But that to me isn't told to me. I think I've like picked up on different perspectives, and that is just something that resonates with me.
How about the judgment part?
I very much resist the judgment, and this might have a lot to do with the fact that I have a lot of internal judgment. So when I think about like going to your afterlife and like being judged for your living, that does not feel right to me. And I think about, the stories of like, God is love. And I'm like, that's such a contradiction of like coming and proving yourself. Like, do you get accepted into my world? Did you do something good enough? And to me, it puts more emphasis on like performance rather than just like genuine connection. Like, for instance, we have a tornado that just hit part of our state and it just like wiped it out, right? So then you've got this rallying of people coming together to support this community, which is beautiful to watch, right? Mm-hmm. But then you've got the people that are like doing it to do good. And I don't ever want to like judge someone's contributions, but I just know that at some point that was a way that I believed, was like, these actions are earning me something later. And it wasn't just like, I'm doing these things because this is what feels good for like humanity. It was like, I'm doing these to earn points. right? So yeah, I don't like the whole idea. It just doesn't go with me. And if other people, like I have family members that still believe that, and I'm like, okay, you get to believe that way, and I just believe differently, and that's okay. So that's my
Your comment
perspective.
reminds me of The Good Place, where you came up and they did your numbers and where you deserve to be based on your numbers.
Yeah. That was such a good show. I love it.
It was.
I love Kristen Bell too. Anything she does is pretty fun.
When you said that, Brenda, what came up for me at first was last time we talked, right? So I haven't been to church since I was maybe 10 or 11. But what came up for me was I was taught that there were like 3 layers. This is just coming up as I'm like remembering, like there's earth, and then there was hell, I guess, and heaven. I'm not quite sure if but that's what my memory is bringing to me. And yeah, like based on your sins, you get to go one way or the other. And then that brought up like praying at nighttime, because you need to be forgiven for your sins. And then that judgment, right, of like, we're doing wrong. And like, how do we decide? We don't decide, right? Like God decides. And so it was like growing up, there was like, I don't think that there was anything like within my family talked about, if you do wrong, you're going to maybe the 10 Commandments. I'm not quite sure, but like heaven or hell, but now I just think like we have souls, and kind of like what Christy, right? Like, and once our body is done being here, then our soul moves on. I haven't thought much about like, where does it move on to? I don't know, but I know I feel like it just continues. And our soul is just in this body in this moment until it's time to move on for something else.
I love that you said the 3 levels, because it totally made me think of Gene Keys, the shadow, the gift, and the city. Like the shadow is what we deem as hell. It's in the darkness. It's down below. Earth is our gift. It's being present in the now, in this experience that we're having as human beings. And then heaven is like the siddhi. It's exploring that once we've removed the ego self or the survival mind, what we come to. And I like the idea of having, we can bring heaven to our present experience, and we can bring hell to our present experience. And sometimes we want to explore that. So I kind of paused. I know Brenda hasn't had a chance to share her experience yet. So it's like this little evolution coming up here of everybody's thoughts. I personally have had past life experiences. I have had things happen that are beyond my being able to explain within anyone else's doctrine or realm, that I know absolutely within myself to be true. So when I started realizing some of these things that were happening to me, with me, for me, I started to explore the scientific side of things. Like energy can neither be created or destroyed. We talk a lot about our emotions, our feelings, energy in motion, emotion, being a certain vibration. With Abraham, we've listened to the idea that we create our reality. And so as far as the afterlife goes, what I have come to believe is that we actually create these experiences. We actually, our vibration, our energy, our souls start spinning that vibration into manifest us coming to be greeted by others that are part of our soul family, that are part of part of the energy in which is receiving us here. And we are creating this experience to have this completely co-creative experience with other energies, other human beings. And that when our physical body leaves, it's just organic material, just like a flower that has bloomed and, been a part of that beauty. And then it goes back to the earth to be created yet again. We see reincarnation here on earth all the time. We see it happen in science. We see it happen in the galaxies, stars that are born, and then, black holes that are destroyed. So I oftentimes like to look at everything in the whole, not just like my experience as a human being. I see that reflected in the earth. I see it reflected in the universe. I see it reflected in everything. And so I personally believe that I created this body. My body is my playground. I am here to explore both the heaven and the hell of it, for the expansion of consciousness, for the expansion of my growth, both as an individual and beyond that. And I know that I have had some experiences that I completely believe reincarnation is real. So yeah. Brenda, what say you?
I say I'm gonna share the past first, because I think it helps explain things for me anyway. My childhood religion believed that the dead are conscious of nothing at all. When you die, you're done. If you are deemed worthy of a resurrection after an apocalypse type event, then you'll be resurrected and have eternal life here on Earth. You're stuck on the planet. They also believed that there was a select few, a number of 144,000, that got to go to heaven and become part of the ruling class, if you will. And I had a girlfriend whose mother believed she was one of those select few. And even as a child, because at that point we didn't know when they were going to be all called up to heaven, because it wasn't like when you die, it was like going to be some form of what other people view as the rapture event. Sure. And I kept thinking to myself, how could God be so cruel as to take her mother away? And what was she supposed to do? Because I'm thinking from an 8 to 10-year-old mind, right? Her mother's going to be gone. What is she going to do? How could God do that, to just decide to take her? Then you start asking the questions, well, how does she know she's one of those? And then the answer you get back, well, if you have to ask the question, you're not one, right? So that all of those things, it's like, well, I'm not good enough to be one of those, or else I'd know I was one of those. I have issues with my friend, so that was all kinds of, to me, mental trauma. They don't even have in hell to think about. It's either total annihilation or a resurrection, right? You're just either gone or you're coming back someday. But just the emotional part of, if she lost her mother, then what? And that's mine. I believe now, and my beliefs are still evolving. I will admit that. The more I learn, the more I think things through and see what resonates with me. I believe I'm here for this experience. I believe there was many experiences before. I believe there'll be many experiences after, whether or not it's similar to this human form or something entirely different. That part I'm not 100% sure of yet. But I definitely feel like this is not just it. Right. I feel like we're here to, like Tanya said, have fun and play, to have experiences. I think we set ourselves up for the experiences we're having. Haven't figured out why I picked all of mine yet, but
don't you think, like, I guess whatever the next level is, I have so much anticipation for it to be like, almost like you get to look back and see all the dots connected. And you're like, oh, that's why that did that. And that's why it's like, it's all going to, it's like when you watch like a drama and at the very end, you're like, oh, that's why that character did this. And I feel like that's the way I look at my life. It's like, it's all going to just kind of piece together in some capacity. And a lot of times I don't really know what that looks like. You know, it's beyond my control.
Yep. I'm really curious to have those, I'll say conversations, because that's the language we use, right? I'm curious to have the conversations with those who I made arrangements with for this experience. Did we do what we set out to do, right? And how could you agree to be that person for me? I mean, thank you, but oh my God, you did amazingly well at making my experience shitty. So, you know,
right.
That's the kind of thing not that I have a shitty experience, but there have been shitty experiences along the way. And it's just like, wow. And religion for me happens to be one of those. I really picked a tough haul with that to get to where I am now. And I'm thankful for it, but I'm scarred from it at the same time and still working through a lot of those issues. So
there's an Alyssa Cara song where she talks about your scars are what make you beautiful. Like it's the reminder of the experience. And then Erin had texted me a couple of days ago, reminder about something that Dr. Joe Dispenza says, that a memory or an experience without an emotional charge is wisdom. And wisdom is our wealth. That is what like expands our value, is our wisdom. And that comes from our experiences or our memories. There's something else you said that about, I don't know why I would choose this. Oftentimes people get mad at me for saying, yeah, you chose this life. You created this.
I was going to bring that up because every time that I hear those words come out of your mouth, I'm like, I don't really think I want to hear that right now. I'm like, I don't think I need to be redirected back to me being the blame here. Do you not see my suffering?
And the thing that so many people just like, they're not quite ready until the awareness starts to really flower into the understanding is that, this event, say an event happens to us, or a situation happens to us, or a childhood happens to us. And then we're like, yeah, but this because of this. Yeah, but this because of this. But what's happening in that moment is we are basically re-administering that suffering to ourselves.
Not that we want to hear it though.
I know, because you just really want to be the victim, and likely because, I mean, like thinking about the role that I help parents with now, like Erin, you brought up the statement of like compassionate parenting. It's like, I grew up with parents that really didn't know how to do that because they weren't modeled it. And so now when I find myself reliving some of that maybe childhood trauma, I think what I'm looking for is just that compassion, right? Like in that suffering, it's like bringing in that nurturing space, but not until I've been able to give myself that compassion and that nurturing has it even felt fulfilling, because nobody can make that go away except for me. Like the longer that I stayed in that victim story, just kept that wound wide open and so painful.
It's like what we said in Utah. I don't know, Brenda, if you were on the walk or not, but it's like, we're all victims and we all have a responsibility, right? Like, it's like we get to decide how long we're going to stay there, and that goes along with the contrast, right? Like you, Christy, wouldn't see that you want compassion for these children if you hadn't had that experience.
Sure. Where does the statement come from? I know we've all used it. It's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. Where does that come from? Do you all know?
Dr. Gabor Mate, I think,
Okay.
was one of the first places I heard that, whether or not it's his original statement. But yeah, Dr. Gabor Mate.
I think that's so beautifully said,
Mhm.
like kind of appreciating maybe the victim story, but then also that empowerment of like, and you can move forward through this.
And this shows up a lot in religion and spirituality. In religion, a lot, that judgment, that thing that, the putting us in a place of heaven and hell, and the contradictions of, like, how I saw it, the contradiction that, well, God is love, God is unconditional love, but yet I'm getting judged.
Right.
Wait a hot minute. And so, like, looping back to the reincarnation piece, I believe that if energy cannot be created and destroyed, that means that my energy, once this body is no longer able to host that energy, that my energy will leave and likely be back again. And it may be, next time I might manifest myself as a cat. My cat in particular.
I love the idea of connecting people that have passed to, like, my grandmother loved butterflies. And so now every time I see a butterfly, that is just like my symbol of remembrance for her. Tanya, I know you have some that you like symbolize as well.
Hummingbirds. And this weekend it was actually an accordion. So we were walking through one of the overheads in Vegas, where you can't, some places you can cross the street, but other places on the strip you can't. You have to go on an overpass. And I was walking on an overpass, and there was a man who looked like he was possibly Hispanic descent, had on a cowboy hat, and he had a blue accordion. Now, my mom played accordion, and as soon as I walked up, I was like, oh, right now my mom is the wind that is moving through that accordion.
That's really cool.
Like, the wind is energy, right? It's that invisible power of presence. And as he was playing the accordion, I was like, how often do you see, like, she was supposed to be in Mexico. She loved their a lot of the kind of that party, fun, aliveness spirit, and this guy is playing stuff on an accordion, and I was just like, oh, there's my mom.
Nonetheless, the strip of Vegas, like, where do you go for fun? Which I'm not a huge Vegas fan, but like
us either.
Energy.
But yeah,
lights, energy, noise, never sleeps.
Yeah.
Oh wow, that's really cool.
So my mom was an accordion in that moment. Yeah.
Beautiful.
That's neat.
Beautiful. I'm going to bring up another topic.
Yes.
This one I'm calling faith flopping. And the reason I'm calling it faith flopping is because of the, I'll call it the word evolution, which might set some religions off to begin with, but the evolution of their beliefs. And the one I'll bring out, I have two in particular in my mind. The first one is one that I think most people can relate to. So the treatment of those that aren't heterosexual. That's that, right? There's either no acceptance or tolerance whatsoever. It's a choice, and you must choose differently to belong here. You must be healed of this. We'll tolerate you, but we'll judge you behind your back like you might be contagious, right? Those kinds of things. Or don't ask, don't tell. Right? To the point of some organizations have become more tolerant. Tolerance is at the point of don't ask, don't tell. Some have formed to actively, attract those people for a sense of belonging. again, another thing with division, right? We have our set of standards, and if you don't fit our set of standards, you can't belong. Sometimes that hurts so bad that you lose membership, right? And then that might encourage you to change your platform so as not to lose membership or faith of your community. So that's one that sticks for me. I don't know how that resonates with any of you guys.
This goes back to like what you said the first time, right? Like the hypocrisy for me, it's like, it doesn't make any sense, right? Like we say that we want everyone to be included, and yet we're going to like segregate or judge the people and all the people, right? And it's like, who's the boss here, right?
Exactly.
And so that I never understood it. It never made sense to me. One time, maybe it was a couple of years ago, after we had taken Grayson out of, it was like a homeschool and a school. So she would go to school 2 days a week, and then she would go to do her work at home the other 2 days. She thought she wanted to go to school 5 days a week, and it was a private school. And they, over the phone interview, they asked questions, and then they said, well, what church do you belong to? And I said, well, we don't go to church. And she was like, well, I just want to let you know that we don't allow people that, shouldn't say it in these exact words, basically like, if you don't belong to a church, you can't go to school here. And so I told Grayson, and Grayson's like, I don't understand. Like, I want to go to school. Doesn't Jesus love all the people? And I'm like, yeah, like to this 6 and 7 year old. And I was 10 at the time, but it's like, it doesn't make sense how you're going to judge, which is exactly what, the preacher that we went, when I was 10, right? It was like condemning, homosexuals. And then here he is having a relationship with another man. And it's like, wait a second, I don't understand how this is. And here we go back to, it's not anybody's place, right? Like,
right.
No.
So
Unconditional love is supposed to be unconditional love, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's what they purport.
with conditions.
With conditions, yeah. Fit our box.
Unconditional love, but with conditions.
Fit our box, or go find another box to fit into. Yeah. So my personal one with this flip-flopping is blood transfusions. So as a child growing up, there was a biblical belief that you could not, I think the writing was the blood of others, eating blood, that kind of thing in the Old Testament. And they protracted that to modern medicine. You cannot have a blood transfusion. And for me, my personal hit was my dad had to have open heart surgery, and very strong faith on his part. And my fear of him dying on the table because he could not have a blood transfusion if things go wrong. I mean, quadruple bypass, there's going to be blood going on. What I didn't know from the time I had been a child to that point where he chose to do what he did for himself, they changed their position slightly in that he could put aside his own blood for that surgery. And that wasn't the same thing. Whereas before, it didn't matter. If it was not in your body already, it couldn't go in. And so interesting to see how, for me, that was a flip-flop of, our ruling is rock solid until, and my guess is, I don't know this for a fact, my guess is that it hit somebody high enough up in the organization that the rules had to change that then applied to others. I mean, when I was a kid, I also heard about if you were high enough up in the chain, you could celebrate your birthday and it was okay. But those of us who were down, further levels of the organization, that was just one of the rules. You couldn't celebrate anything. Yeah. So I just bring that one up as a flip-flop because to me, I mean, if it were based on medical justification and there was actually scientific support behind it, great, fine. But they do so many, science has come such a long way. To me, it's a good thing that they flip-flop, but usually, if you've got the set in stone 10 commandments kind of thing that they've touted for years and years and years, and then all of a sudden, oh, but this exception is okay. That's the conditional, right? And it just, it sits wrong for me. So
Brenda, this may be a whole nother topic, but I'm so curious how much pleasure was allowed. Like, you're not allowed to have birthdays, like pleasure and
Suffering.
the church. Yeah.
Suffering and persecution, because they thought you were exalted if you were persecuted, like somebody made fun of you, or
that was a good thing. Like it
was a good thing. It was supposed to be a good thing because you were portraying your faith, and therefore you will be rewarded in the end by being miserable now.
It reminds me of like the Abraham, and I think I was watching a Dr. Joe Dispenza yesterday too. He was actually giving, well, it was with Tanya, with his I don't know what it's called, but it's like an intensive before you go to his retreat. It's like 5 videos, and he was actually in a church in Austin, Texas, and he was talking about, like, there's no suffering, right? Like, it's like, there's no suffering card, like, oh, I suffered the most. So, but religion and
this might be another topic as well, but I'm giggling over the fact that so over the weekend, a conversation that David and I had, he was talking about like hierarchies, and about because we were he was commenting on how we've got regular security, and then we have TSA pre, and he was like, we invented this TSA for some exclusivity, and now just like so many people can get TSA pre, so now they're going to have to invent a new level that's like TSA plus minus, or TSA diamond gold, or whatever.
Right.
Just talking about like first class on the airplane versus the regular class. And it just struck me when you were talking about, if you're high enough up in the church, then the rules can maybe get bent for you. Makes me think of like the Catholic religion, and how we tell the priests are, not allowed to take wives, or not allowed to have sex or whatever. And of course, like, there are going to be people that's really going to piss off. But of course, there's all this like pedophile or this impropriety going on when we're asking people to completely remove the human experience, the human body or desire away from the thing that it was created to be. Like, if you're going to manifest yourself as a human being, you're going to manifest pleasure, you're going to manifest pain, you're going to manifest a vessel that can experience all of that. And then you go adding in this whole, if you're made in his image and you're supposed to be, God is unconditional love, why are we having all of this judgment and, how we're interpreting things, and the whole homosexuality piece? Like, I could get started on the blood as well, but the homosexuality piece is the one that hits home for me because of my mom. Like, okay, so you're made in his image. And I think it's funny that we think God is a man, like that there's actually masculine or feminine, right? If you're a God, you're omnipotent, you're all things, right? But this idea that if you're made in his image and yet you're rejected for who you are, who you love, like there's 2 components to the homosexuality piece. And I think people focus in on just one. It's like being told who you're allowed to love. Aren't we supposed to love everybody? And then
including yourself, right? Like,
yes. Yeah. And then the rejection of any kind of physical pleasure. Yeah. I could be on my soapbox.
That's why I brought it up.
This whole conversation, but I want to open the floor for any more.
I feel like, I'm all for everything that you all just said, but also the word like evolution comes into my thoughts, and just knowing that we were also talking about like flexibility earlier in our conversation. And like thinking, I don't want things to be so rigid that it doesn't allow for space for the evolution. Like we do have new thoughts and ideas and new science. And, like I want us as a society to be flexible and to grow and learn. But it's when that hypocrisy or the control or the power, it's like you only get to make the decisions, or your voice is only heard, or if it's only, an important change if the person in power is who is affected by it. That is where I feel like it doesn't settle, because I think if we're looking at making a collective decision, then the collective contribution has to be considered.
Yeah. Like the 1500s called, they want their religion back.
What's interesting when you say evolution, but evolution in science, right? Because I was always, when I was little, I was like, I don't understand. Like, how do the animals,
Right.
change and evolve? And then the
Right.
Bible says this, and it's like, it doesn't. And the Bible says we've only been around for X amount of years. And then science says this, and it's like, it doesn't make any sense, right? It's like this, and I think Brenda, you touched on it last week. It's like, it's just an interpretation of what, men, women, I don't know, along the way decided to, you know more, Brenda, about like writing, but it's like, that doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm. And I think
you give up your critical thinking at the door. That's part of what religion expects you to do. Is you're agreeing to their tenet of rules, and your free thinking or your challenging thinking, your critical thinking is not encouraged, allowed, should be stifled, those kinds of things. So while it doesn't make any sense, if you want to belong, you have to accept it. Even if you don't internally, you have to give the front of accepting it in order to belong. And as I think it was you, Erin, that said last week, is that wanting to belong so strong that you give up who you are. And for a lot of people, that's a fact.
Yeah. That prefrontal cortex, the humanness, has to be abandoned.
And such separateness, it's like whatever's supposed to bring us together actually ends up, or maybe it's just a separation of oneself, right? Or both,
Which kind of segues to my next topic.
Christy, did you have something you wanted to add?
I was just going to make a reference about, on the occasion, I find myself joking, and it's really not a joke at all. Like, I have the utmost respect for women that, here comes my poor geography, like in Middle Eastern countries where they don't have a voice on what they get to wear or who they get to marry or how many children they get to have or what education they, those are just the things that I'm aware of, right? There might even be far more restrictions. And I always think, like, when I get a little heated about something, I'm like, oh my gosh, I could not imagine myself in that type of upbringing. Like, I think I would have been persecuted at like 5, how do these women, and I heard this conversation the other day with Glennon Doyle on her podcast, and a woman, I think from Pakistan, was calling in to ask her, like, how can I be more outspoken? And Glennon was like, I have no idea, because I'm a white woman. And I just think, I don't know, my mind can't even fathom what that level, I'm going to say control, but what that lifestyle is like.
But then even under white woman is human.
Mm-hmm.
Like, at the base of all of that, I think and again, this is probably another whole month's topic, is like racism, even separating ourselves by the labels of either our color or our faith. I mean, what we're exploring right now is that separation by religion or our faith. Under it all, we're just human.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I agree.
All right. Moving on. Next topic is called jumping in and jumping out. Yep. So I'll read you along my little bullets and see what conversation that sparks. So most organizations require a committed buy-in for a right to belong. Membership.
What is this,
I know,
Costco?
Erin, you're no.
What is this, Costco?
Well, and then my question becomes, what's wrong with just attending? Why do I need a membership? What does that offer me? Is
this above tithing or is this separate from tithing?
Well, to me, this is about tithing.
Oh, this is tithing.
about
Okay.
tithing, right?
Okay.
Because if I just attend, you're not keeping track of me, right? If I just walk in the door, sit my butt down on a pew, a chair, whatever it is, and I just attend and I go out the door and I either contribute to the past plate or I don't, you're not keeping track of me. Right. Membership to me gives you a way to track me to like an obligation to contribute, tithing. Some organizations go as far down as to audit the family's books to see if you're doing what you're supposed to do. Yeah, I know, Aaron, I'm watching your face. I'm trying not to laugh, but to me, it's a serious topic, right? Because I've attended quite a few different organizations looking to fill that void. You know, I shared that last week, looking for that void filling in my innards that I thought was going to be filled that way, but I never crossed a line to join or sign a membership or whatever it is that they require to have to be part of their congregation, right?
I'm like, is this like disguised as like old business? What is happening here? Like, but this is me and my like unknowingness, right? Like I don't just like, this sounds, I need to inspect this.
No, maybe it's not every religion, but this is my experience. Then there's, some organizations require you to do a formal conversion before you'll be able to be considered a member, right? If you're Catholic and you want to become Jewish, there's a conversion process that has to happen. If you're Christian, you want to become Catholic, or if you're anything and want to become Muslim, any of those things usually require some form of conversion. Some of them require shunning of those that are not who you are, right? Some of the cults cut you off from your family completely. You can't associate. Go ahead.
Scientology. I remember watching the Lisa
Remmer or something.
Remini.
Leah Remini.
Yeah.
Leah. Yeah.
Leah Remini talking about Scientology and some of the things like how she was ostracized trying to leave the church and how they, separation of family, like if you're out of the church, you're out of the family.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. That's one of the things, right?
Why do we have to be assholes to each other?
Money, power.
Yeah. It's about religion is a lot about money. That's my personal opinion. Because
and I do understand from a business perspective, right? Like there does need to be some kind of a flow. But I think when you start to make the sermons about money and contribution and the guilt and the shame and the judgment that comes alongside of it, it's like it's going back to people giving out of obligation rather than giving because of like a contribution.
Speaking from their heart.
And thinking like, oh, if I sacrifice this money, that I'm earning my space, right? It's like righteous. Is that the word? Is that righteousness? Like it's my goodness because I've given you my money and I've sacrificed.
I remember conversations about whether the 10% that was required was before or after taxes. I mean, there's serious things behind there.
Yeah.
Next bullet I had was like baptism, which I've been told is an outward sign of faith, right? Why is that kind of thing necessary if the relationship between you and God is supposed to be personal? Why is that a mandate for membership? Because that's been my experience. If, first step is baptism to as part of your conversion to make sure you're qualified.
Well, and how can that happen for infants? I think about this so many times.
How'd they make a choice?
Making that choice for their children, which I understand the logic of it, right? It's like we're doing this out of our belief. But I think about, had I done this differently, had I had children at this part of my belief system, would I have chosen to baptize them, or would I have just allowed them to discern when they wanted to be baptized?
And that's another thing. Some religions don't do birth or infant baptisms. They make you make the choice first. And the Catholics, do they baptize at birth and then they go through confirmations as the adult choice?
I think so.
No, I mean, you're doing your first communion in second grade. So
And you don't even know enough to choose.
No, it's just, to me, it's a ceremony. It's a place, from my perspective. It is
This is all our perspective.
To put your pretty dress on, and you get your picture taken, and you have a party, and you get money because you get gifts from your, it's really less about the sacrament. I will tell you God's honest truth. I grew up Catholic. My whole family's been Catholic. My husband's Catholic. Like, that has been the air that I have breathed for years. And it wasn't until probably 3 years ago, I'm 42 years old, okay, that I remember my friend telling me something about having the blood and body of Christ in her body. And I was like, what are you talking about? And she was like, communion. That is what that is. And that is when I made the connection at like 39 years old. And to think that that sacrament had happened when I was in second grade, and like then had multiple experiences of religion classes and other sacraments that would technically build on each other, right? But to me, my experience has just been more about checking the boxes, more so than really making like an informed decision. It's just like what you do, because that's what your family does.
Do you feel like that it's been like a proving? Like, is it proving?
I wouldn't say proving, but more so a belonging. Because when people, like, I have friends that are not Catholic and their children have chosen to go to Catholic school with my children when they were younger. And so anytime we would do like a family, I don't know, like a group event, so all the parents would come to church, the non-Catholic parents would not go to communion. Or if you go to communion and you're not Catholic, you don't receive communion. And it's like this, it's a disconnect. And I never judged people that did not go to communion. But my friend would say she felt judged because she didn't belong. She was in this place and not participating in this sacrament. And it's just like, I always had to remind her, I was like, I don't look at people like that. I'm just like happy to see you. And, but that might not have been her experience from other situations.
But why should somebody be allowed to tell you whether or not you could participate?
Yes. And I mean, I kind of think about like my house, my rules type of thing, like it might have been perceived as disrespectful to take communion if you don't believe in it. I don't know. I don't know that anybody combusted if they took in their communion, but I'm certain there are people that do it just to belong, even though they might not, believe in the meaning behind it. But yeah, it's more, to me, it is more of a belonging.
Yeah.
Very fascinating.
I don't know if we're going to get to it, but my last topic on this one is the ever constant fear of excommunication or disconnection or disfellowshipping or whatever the organization might call it, right? It might require you to remove yourself from your friends and family if you make a choice to leave or if you choose not to follow the rules. Most require shunning of those who have been excommunicated, for that, whether they're your biological family or not. This could show up in different ways for different people, and I've seen all of them. So it could be if the church attracted you by becoming your family, and as part of that, you receive financial support. right? So those tithes go somewhere, and sometimes it goes back to people who are struggling, right? So that could be a total loss of your financial support. Could be. I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
It could be your job if you were provided one from a fellow church member. It could be your business if, the organization decided to prop you up in your business and support you, and you decide to leave, and that all that support's going to come out from you. It could be your family if they became the family that you never had, or you don't have, for whatever reason. So that's the kind of things that control is based on that fear of disconnection. And that is something, for me, the only thing that saved me from being totally disconnected from my family is I never took that final step of baptism and joining. Right. But because I never took it, I can't be excommunicated for the way I choose to live my life after that fact. Right. So that's the only way that I still have family members that talk to me, is because I never made that jump to have then retracted it later. So that's a topic.
And I see this all as this is the human condition. This is the, back to us almost, in that, the first human that appeared on the planet, Lilith. What comes to mind is like Lilith. Adam and Lilith. Lilith wouldn't abide by being subservient to Adam, and so she was excommunicated from the Garden of Eden, and then Eve was brought in, made from Adam, to be subservient and to fit in because she was a part of him. This is that human condition. When we are ejected from the tribe, when it is deemed that we do not belong, that compromises our safety, our ability to thrive and to live. I'm going to take away your money, wealth. I'm going to take away your family, belonging. I'm going to take away your job, your place of being in this world. Like, all of those threats are just, I see it as just the whole human condition, right? And the variety of ways that we have.
And that becomes a lot of the trauma, right? Because if you shove down who you are so you don't lose your sense of belonging and your sense of worth and your sense of value, because you can't afford, whether financially, emotionally, spiritually, you can't afford that disconnect. That's where a lot of hurt comes in.
And I think from a space of compassion too, it gives us the opportunity to look at why people stay. Like, I'm watching a Netflix or maybe an HBO series about something in Tennessee. I can't even remember the name of this show, but my brain is like not computing. I'm like, why would people stay in this space and do these things and hear these? And it's like, oh, of course they would, right? Like, just, of course they would. They were needing something and they were getting it. And it wasn't until, I'm like, I can't say that word. Fast forward a couple of years, and then they're like, oh, wait, now I see kind of clearly what's happening. But
food for thought, right?
Yeah. I love that we're able to just really have these conversations. Like, I just think that there is no, in my opinion, I don't feel like any of us are trying to have a right or a wrong. It's just like, here's our experience, here's our perspective. And coming back to the idea of evolution, like, this is how we evolve, like hearing the stories out of just pure interest and curiosity rather than needing to agree or disagree or prove ourselves.
Correct.
I love this space. And this is a conversation that I find I never really engage in, because sometimes the listeners that I participate with aren't really good listeners.
Well, they have, oftentimes what I encounter is a need to be able to either prove or show why their thoughts or beliefs are right. And that need we can see comes out of that deep desire to have that belonging, safety, and connection, right?
I'm
Above
like,
all
I love
else.
just being connected by humans, not by religion.
Yeah.
So the first topic for next week, as we wind down our available time this week, is for us to talk about our God. I'm going to ask you to tell me about your God, your higher power, your something that's greater than your physical self, and what you see and what your practices are to share with others. And whether or not that's based on something that is part of a religious belief that still resonates with you or not, or something that people in a religious belief would think is totally taboo. Right? So that's the plan for next week.
I love it.
Sweet.
Love it. Yeah.
Love you all.
Thank you. Love you all for sure.
Awesome.
Yes.
Until next time.
Until next time.
Mwah.
Bye.